Hey, this is Jeff Johnson. I'm the owner of the Johnson Team, and this is Johnson Team Talk. And today we're talking about the appraisal process. And we, over the years, have gotten lots of questions from buyers and realize, again, that a lot of people, if you haven't bought a home before, and even if you have, might not fully understand what all that entails, the timelines, processes, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go through the questions. So why do we do an appraisal, and do they have to be done? So the answer is they don't always have to be done. There are times, especially if you're doing cash, it is totally on you as a buyer as to whether you want to do it. There are also times with conventional loans where you don't necessarily have to. Most of the time you do. I'd say 95% of the time, if you're using a loan, you have to do appraisal. So we're just going to go with that. We can address when you don't have to in another blog post. So here are the questions we're going to be looking at. Why do we do appraisals and do we have to? Who orders them? How long do they take? Are there different kinds of appraisals? What happens if they come in low? And what happens if they come in high? And do we have to show them to the sellers? So that first question we kind of started to answer. We do them because the lender typically requires it. And there's a few instances where they don't, but again, they usually do. So lender requires it, lender orders it. You own the appraisal. So that appraisal is yours, but your lender orders it, and typically you pay for it. Sometimes lenders will cover the cost if the deal doesn't close, but you pay for it, you own it, and your lender orders it. And how long do they take? It depends. Depends how busy they are, depends on the season, because oftentimes in the summer they're slammed and they take longer to do it. If they're not slammed, they can get out there within a week. But typically we're talking a week to 2 weeks right now are what the appraisal times are taking. And it also depends on what type of loan, because sometimes like VA appraisers are more backed up than say somebody might be for conventional loans. So it really just depends. But really, a lot of lenders are ordering them right up front now. So, well, good lenders are, not all of them are. A lot of the internet lenders and others won't. But if you have a relationship with a lender, or your real estate agent has a relationship with lenders, then you should be able to order them right away. That way you can get the process moving. So are there different kinds? Yes, there's VHA, FHA, conventional. Those are the typical ones you see. There's also other types of loans out there, but those are the ones you usually see. Conventional tend to be the simplest. VA appraisers, again, it's very subjective, but they have the strictest guidelines to follow. And FHA, I believe, is very similar. And they're going to be the pickiest when they walk through the house. For you as a buyer, you don't have a lot of control over the appraiser. You have no control over the appraiser. You, depending on what type of loan you're doing, that appraisal goes into a pool, and whatever appraiser gets it. So if you're doing a VA loan, you don't have any choice. You're using a VA appraiser, and you're going by their guidelines. If you're using an FHA loan, you're going through the FHA guidelines, and same with conventional. So keep in mind when you're doing a VA or FHA loan, those appraisers are asked to look a little more strictly at the home, like any kind of peeling paint, or if it's not livable, or, again, gray areas are appliances. Certain appliances, like a stove, for example, some appraisers are going to require you have it, but they're typically not anymore. What other questions? What happens if your appraisal comes in low? If your appraisal comes in low, you have the right to go back and negotiate with the seller as long as you have that in your contract. If you don't have that in your contract, well, with the VA and FHA loan, it's there no matter what. Conventional loan, it depends whether you have it in the contract or not. So on a VA or FHA especially, but if it's in your contract on a conventional, if it comes in low, you can go back to the seller and say, hey, the appraisal came in low. We want you to come down to this price. Seller can say yes, seller can say no. If the seller says no, then you have to decide if you want to move forward or not. Depending on how much money you put down, you may have to come up with the cash difference. So if you're doing a 20% down conventional and you need 20% down and you're right at that mark, if the appraisal comes in low, you are going to have to come up with a gap. So if it comes in $5,000 low, you're going to have to come up with that $5,000. Or the seller can drop the price, one or the other. Oftentimes, though, you're seeing in order to be competitive with offers, you need to have an appraisal clause in there that says if the appraisal comes in low, then you'll cover that difference and still pay it. So it really depends on what you put in the contract there as to what you're going to be required to do if it comes in low. But again, it's why it's important to have an agent that you know and trust that can walk you through that process of negotiating with the seller if that appraisal does come in low. If the appraisal comes in high, well, good for you. You got some equity in the house. You are not required to disclose that to the seller. That appraisal is yours. All the seller needs to know is that you're moving forward with the loan. So you can say appraisal came in fine, we're moving forward, and then move on. because you might, if you're still negotiating inspection items, you might not want the seller to know that the appraisal came in high, because they may say, hey, you're getting a ton of equity in this house anyway. Your appraisal came in $20,000 high. We're not going to fix these things. You have all this extra equity now. You fix it yourself. So it's not always in your best interest, and you should have an agent that's not showing that appraisal to the listing agent unless you give them permission to for some reason. And we're on the listing side a lot, and we wouldn't expect a buyer's agent to show us the appraisal. We just want to know, did it come in at value or above? That way we know we're moving on with the loan. So if you have any other questions at all about appraisals, put them in the comments below. And I'm experimenting with t-shirts and blazers. I just bought this and I haven't, I think that's the first time I bought a blazer in my entire life. I had a suit from high school, but this is the first blazer I've ever bought, and I'm experimenting with t-shirts, so I'm not sure. The pig may be too much. Try it with the black one. The black one looks good. You can also tell me if this looks horrible. I'm open to anybody's advice. All right. Hope you all have a great day. Post your questions or comments, and I'm sure I didn't cover everything in here. So any comments that you'd like to add to what I said, or even if I was mistaken, add it in the comments. Thanks, guys.